Ever wondered why some countries stay rich while others struggle? You're not alone. Welcome to It's a Complicated World After All. Today we're tackling a big question. Can we fix the global financial system? The system was shaped by neoliberal policies from the 80s, pushing free markets and privatization. But for developing nations, this often meant debt and dependency. Structural adjustment programs forced countries to privatize services and cut social spending. The result? Deepened inequality and weakened economies. But there's hope. Leaders like Barbados's Mia Mottley are demanding reforms, and regional banks are exploring alternatives. Solutions like dedicated global public goods funds and public-private partnerships offer a way forward. So, can we reform the system, or do we need something entirely new? Join the conversation and let us know in the comments.
So welcome back to It's a Complicated World After All. I'm Gabrielle, and today we're asking, is the global financial system fundamentally broken? More importantly, can it be reformed, or is it time to replace it? Joining me are
Karen here. If you've ever wondered why rich nations keep getting richer while developing nations struggle under endless debt, we're here to explain.
And hi, I'm Danita. This conversation isn't just about economics. It's about power and who controls the system and what happens when the nations push back.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. The global financial system is often criticized as being unfair. But how did it get this way?
So it goes back to neoliberalism, the economic ideology that pushed free markets, privatization, and minimal government intervention. This was championed in the 80s, led by leaders such as Ronald Reagan in the US and Margaret Thatcher in the United Kingdom. They influenced institutions like the IMF and the World Bank to enforce these policies worldwide.
And this is a result of structural adjustment programs. If developing countries wanted loans, they had to follow strict conditions, privatize public services, cut social spending, and open up markets to foreign investors. In theory, this was supposed to create stronger economies. In reality, it made nations weaker.
So instead of helping, these policies deepen inequality?
Absolutely, Gabrielle. So SAPs stripped governments of economic control. They had to sell off state assets, often to foreign companies, while slashing spending on healthcare, education, and infrastructure. This widened the gap between the rich and the poor and left many economies dependent on foreign investors.
That's a great point, Karen. And the worst part is that developing nations had no choice. They needed the funding for things like infrastructure, healthcare, and climate resistance. But the loans came with strings attached, keeping them trapped in cycles of debt and dependency.
So if the system is so flawed, why don't countries just opt out?
So the problem is that alternatives are limited. The global financial system is still dominated by the Western-led institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. However, some countries and regions are exploring alternatives.
Take CARICOM, for example. The Caribbean Development Bank provides regional funding, which helps lessen reliance on Western institutions, but still face challenges as it does not have massive financial resources like the IMF or the World Bank and debt forgiveness, so options are just limited.
And then there's Barbados' Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, who's been making waves.
Yes. So Mottley has been demanding financial reforms for small island developing states. She argues that the World Bank should lower interest rates for these nations, which face some huge financial burdens because of climate change, but they contribute little to the global emissions. Right now, developing nations are charged higher interest rates, sometimes 2 or 3 times more than the wealthy nations. So she's calling that out.
Exactly, but pushing back comes with risk. When countries challenge the systems, like creating their own regional funds, they often face political and economic pressure from major financial powers.
Okay, so if the system is flawed, what are some actual solutions? Can the World Bank and IMF change, or do we need something entirely new?
So there are ways to improve global finance, but it requires serious reforms. One idea is to create a dedicated global public goods trust fund. This would be separate from traditional development loans and focus on funding things like climate resilience and pandemic preparedness. The Green Climate Fund is a good example of this. It has already secured $20 billion for climate action.
The only challenge with that is getting wealthy nations to contribute. Right now, they are still in control of the financial rules, and they often prioritize their own economics over global needs.
Are there any other financing models that could potentially work?
Yes. So one approach is the hybrid capital investment instruments. The World Bank recently secured $11 billion in hybrid capital pledges, which could mobilize $70 billion over the next decade. This allows them to raise money without increasing debt burdens on borrowing countries.
And there's also the public-private partnerships, PPPs. The Gavi's Vaccine Alliance is a great example as it combines public funding with private investment to ensure low-income countries can access vaccines. Since 2000, it has raised billions and vaccinated nearly 1 billion children.
That sounds promising, but what about global taxation?
The EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism is an interesting case. It taxes imports based on their carbon emissions, which generates revenue by promoting climate action. If similar global taxes are implemented, they could help fund development in the poorer nations.
Okay, so let's look at some real-world examples. Have we seen financial mechanisms succeed or fail in addressing global challenges?
Well, Gabrielle, one major failure was the Pandemic Emergency Financing Facility. The World Bank created it to provide rapid funding for disease outbreaks. But when COVID-19 hit, it delayed payments due to bureaucratic rules. Instead of helping early, it prioritized investor returns.
And then on the flip side, the Green Climate Fund is a successful story as it dedicates the fund for climate resilience and it has attracted major components. It's proof that alternate funding models can work if structured properly.
And Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, also stands out?
Yes, Gavi has proven that public-private partnerships can mobilize large-scale funding for global health. It is an alternative to traditional loan-based development financing.
All right, let's wrap this up. The financial system was designed to benefit powerful nations, leaving others struggling. How do developing nations fight the system without jeopardizing their own future?
They'd have to push for reforms, lower interest rates, debt forgiveness, and new financing mechanisms. But that means challenging the status quo, which will not be easy.
Then there's also regional cooperation, which is key. Examples can be CARICOM and BRICS Plus, and other coalitions need to strengthen their financial independence, and there are more alternatives to be created, which creates less control of Western institutions will over the global finance powers.
And the big question, can the financial system be fixed, or is it time for a new one?
Reform is possible, but power doesn't shift easily. If the Global South wants change, it has to keep demanding it, just like Mia Motley and other leaders are doing.
And one thing is for sure, the fight for financial justice is just getting started.
So, is the global financial system rigged? It certainly wasn't built for fairness, but change is possible. If enough nations push for it, what do you think? Should we reform the system or replace it entirely? Let us know in the comments. See you next time.